For centuries, history books have carefully curated an image of European royalty, one that is whitewashed and incomplete. But hidden beneath layers of rewritten narratives and suppressed truths lies an undeniable fact. There were black rulers in Europe. Some of the most powerful kings, emperors, and monarchs had African ancestry, yet their true heritage was erased, covered up, or deliberately ignored. Today we unveil 10 European rulers who were black, but whose identities were buried in secrecy. First, talk about Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. Born in 1500, Charles V ruled over a vast empire spanning Spain, the Netherlands, Austria, and the Americas. His portraits were later altered to lighten his features. But historical records show that his mother, Joanna of Castile, descended from the Moors of Spain, North African Muslims who ruled the Iberian Peninsula for centuries. His brother, Philip II of Spain, was even referred to as having a dark complexion by his contemporaries. Yet, history concealed the truth. Then, we have King James VI and I of Scotland and England. The man responsible for commissioning the King James Bible had African ancestry through his direct lineage to the Black Moors who once dominated Scotland. Contemporary accounts describe him as having a swarthy complexion and curly hair, but over time, portraits were manipulated, and the truth was lost. Queen Charlotte of England, the wife of King George III, is another buried secret in European history. She was of direct African descent, with her lineage tracing back to Margarita de Castro y Sousa, a black Portuguese noblewoman. Portraits of Queen Charlotte initially depicted her African features, but later versions softened and altered her appearance to fit European beauty standards. Even today, mainstream historians hesitate to acknowledge her African roots, despite overwhelming evidence. Next, we reveal Saint Maurice, the revered Roman commander-turned-saint who became a patron of the Holy Roman Empire. Born in the 3rd century AD, Maurice was of African descent and led the legendary Theban Legion, a group of black African soldiers in the Roman army. His image was widely depicted in European cathedrals, often showing him with dark skin and African features. But as history was rewritten, his black identity was obscured. King Alfonso III of Portugal, known as Alfonso the Great, had African ancestry that was carefully documented yet rarely acknowledged. His African roots came through his marriage to Moorish royalty, blending African bloodlines into the European aristocracy. Despite historical documentation, modern representations have systematically omitted any references to his black lineage. Then there's Emperor Septimius Severus, the Roman emperor from 193 to 211 AD. Born in present-day Libya, Severus was of African and Roman descent. His rule was marked by military strength and strategic expansion. Historical sculptures and busts depict him with distinctly African features, yet later artistic interpretations deliberately whitened his appearance. Even as ruler of Rome, his African heritage was downplayed by later European historians. Another notable figure is Prince Alemayehu of Ethiopia. Though not a European ruler by birth, he was adopted into British royalty after being taken from Ethiopia as a child. Queen Victoria took a personal interest in him, and he was raised within British high society. Though he lived a short and tragic life, his presence in British aristocracy was a direct connection between African and European royal bloodlines. King Ferdinand of Spain, the monarch who sponsored Christopher Columbus, had Moorish ancestry through his mother's side. The Moors ruled Spain for over 700 years, leaving behind a legacy of African and Arabic influence in Spanish bloodlines. Yet history conveniently erases these connections, portraying Ferdinand as a purely European figure. Louis XIV of France, known as the Sun King, reportedly had African ancestry through his mother, Anne of Austria, whose lineage contained Moorish blood. While Louis XIV is famously depicted as a grand European monarch, contemporary accounts of his court describe his dark complexion and African features, something conveniently ignored in modern retellings. And finally, we have Alexander Pushkin, often referred to as the father of Russian literature. While not a king, he was of noble blood and a direct descendant of Hannibal, an African general who served under Peter the Great. Pushkin's black ancestry was acknowledged in Russia, but Western narratives have often overlooked this aspect of his legacy. These are just a few examples of how history has been rewritten to exclude or diminish black presence in European royalty. The truth has always been there, hidden in paintings, buried in records, whispered in historical accounts, but it has been suppressed. The erasure was intentional. It was designed to uphold a narrative that black people never held power in Europe, when in reality, they did. By reclaiming these stories, we challenge the false history that has been fed to us for generations. The presence of black rulers in Europe is not a myth. It is a fact that cannot be ignored. The question is, why was it hidden? And if this was hidden, what else have they kept from us?